1 week season.
1 week season, fam. La Familia. Welcome back to Augusta. Oh, no, never mind. Welcome back to FanDuel Labs, week 12, here with 1 week season. My name is Mike Johnson, M Johnson 86, as I am known in those DFS and best ball streets. We are coming off an interesting week, a Lions smash week, a Taysom Hill goes absolutely bonkers week. Lots of different things going on. We have only a 10-game slate this week. As we head into, it's kind of my favorite little stretch of the year. We've got three great slates in a short time period, with this Sunday's slate followed by the Thanksgiving slate. And then, of course, next Sunday's slate, which will also be a little bit smaller because of all the Thanksgiving days games. So with that said, kind of a lot going on this week. We are ready to rock, and I'm going to bring in my esteemed co-host, Maximus. How are we doing today, Max?
Hey there. Actually, we have 11 games on FanDuel with the Sunday night Eagles-Rams, which will be another good game to following the one last week. Yeah, week 11 was interesting. For all of you who followed me and Mike on the Discords, we really hit the nail on the head in a lot of spots. But unfortunately, if you didn't have, like Mike said, Taysom and Amon-Ra, then you definitely weren't winning a tournament. But in my case, I had a decent week. I had some teams in contention that still had a clear pathway in spite of that. But stuff has to break for 4 quarters, i.e. that Sunday night game with the Chargers and the Bengals, with the Chargers doing next to nothing in the second half. But yeah, I'm looking forward to digging in with you for week 12 here.
Yeah, I think, in hindsight, I probably just even with all the dynamics, I think Taysom, obviously that game was like insane that he had. But with where he was priced, I probably wouldn't have gotten to him anyways on FanDuel. On DraftKings, kind of kicking myself because I had played him. He had been in my player grid the previous 2 weeks. Not that much had really changed, other than maybe you could say the Browns were a little bit tougher on paper matchup. Camaro was projecting as the highest owned player on DraftKings, and he actually, on DraftKings at least, he came in significantly under-owned from where he was projected, which is kind of what I thought would happen and kind of why I didn't really get away from him so much. So, yeah, I mean, it was an interesting week. It was one that we can learn from a little bit. Like I said, I don't think on FanDuel I would have gotten there anyways. But the main reason that I'm a little bit upset that I didn't get to him, or really to Brock Bowers, who's another guy who prior to their week 10 bye, I had him in my player grid a couple times, just because it's like, hey, he's seen a lot of volume. Eventually he's going to hit this like spike week. And I didn't get to him this week, and I was especially disappointed in myself for not getting to them, because I didn't really like the tight ends on the slate in general. I wasn't that thrilled with the position at all. So I feel like I just, from a process standpoint, missed not being like, hey, these guys have ceilings that if there aren't that many tight ends that you're really high on in general, then just go with the guys with the big ceilings. And so, I felt like that was a process miss on my part. But, live and learn and move on.
Yeah, you gave the only reason. It's funny. I've been ever since Shaheed and Kendre Miller were out, I've had a rule of thumb every week, typically on FanDuel. I've had Taysom Hill on at least one team. And that very reason, at 6,400, I think it was just a little too high. And of course, the 1 week that I don't account for him on anything, he goes nuclear. But yeah, it definitely was a price thing for me too on FanDuel with Taysom's. Usually I've been, prior to last week, accounting for him somewhere, on a team, especially if it's depending on who they're playing. But yeah, like you said, you live and learn, and hopefully, we'll have even a better week this week. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that segue, I'll go ahead and pull up the FanDuel screen, and we'll just go ahead and open up the big one again, the Sunday Million. Maybe we'll build in the bomb this week. $55 tournament. It's a nice one. So yeah, let's what do you have for me this week? Where are we starting for building this roster?
Okay. We're going to start with the team that is coming off a bye. They were kind of on the come up prior to the bye. They've been volatile throughout the year, but I think they seem to be hitting their stride. They're definitely in a game environment that I'm looking to target this week. There's clear bringbacks that are concentrated even to an extent. So we're going to start this build with, and I don't think I like deliberately try to do somebody new every week, but it just so happens I don't think we've built a team around this quarterback or team yet either on our show. We're going to go with Kyler Murray for the Arizona Cardinals. With Kyler, he's been volatile periodically, but he's got the rushing upside always that's possible. He definitely looked, probably his best game of the season was prior to the bye, where he was really looking good. And I want to do a little bit of a different pairing, though. I definitely want to stack him, but I actually want to stack him with, and we've talked about doing this from time to time, and I think it's cool. It's usually a little more, maybe not as unique as it used to be, but we're going to pair him with James Conner and Trey McBride at tight end. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. is viable as well, but he's been a really volatile player this year. And I'm looking at James Conner here, and he has averaged over the last 4 weeks, he's averaged 17 rushing attempts a game, and amazingly, 4 targets a game pass-wise or receiving-wise. So he's got some receiving chops. He actually did 5 receptions for 80 yards in their last game. And so I think it's a good setup against Seattle. They're not really an imposing defense. And I think it's a game environment on the other side where you can bring back pieces. I think for this particular team, I had in mind Kyler, James Conner, Trey McBride, and then a bring back of Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's been really hot. Like the last 2 weeks, he's been targeted 11 and 13 times, 2 touchdowns in that span. He does have a ceiling. 2 weeks ago, he got up to 36 points. I will say this, he's only $400 separated from DK Metcalf. So typically I would go with the perimeter receiver more than a slot guy, but they've kind of been using Jackson Smith pretty much all over the field. So for the purpose of this team, I figured, Kenneth Walker's viable too, but I figured Jackson Smith will be the bring back. So we have our quarterback, running back, and tight end attachment with the Jackson Smith bring back, and then I'll pass it back over to you where you want to go from here.
Yeah, so I do like this lineup, this game. It is a competitive one. It's important for the NFC West race. The Cardinals leading, and then 3 teams tied a game behind them. So yeah, I think that this game having like a 47.5 point total as we sit here on Wednesday, definitely a viable, more than viable. I think it's, one of the better game environments on the slate. And I think that especially you look at Murray and Connor and how they kind of play off each other. Both kind of are likely to have a big game. Like you're gonna account for every Arizona touchdown as long as nothing fluky. Like a couple games back, Connor, like he took a shot like at the 1 yard line and had to come out, and then Trey Benson stole the touchdown. And then there was they were running a draw with like 10 seconds left in the half against the Bears, and DeMarcado busted it for a 60-yard touchdown. But like pretty much he's like the guy in competitive spots coming off the bye, big division matchup here. He's going to be the guy. Connor's going to be the guy. So, you look at this, you look at Seattle, they did well last week defensively against the Niners, but I think George Kittle being out and the Niners injuries had a lot more to do with that than we probably anticipated coming in. And then Trey McBride, you look at all the tight ends on the slate, 6,700. He's not that much more expensive than some of these other guys who are, I guess, a little less consistent. McBride is the tight end 3 on the season in points per game. There's, tight end 3 in receptions, yards, and targets. And he doesn't have a receiving touchdown yet. And I think that's, second half of the season, that's going to correct itself. So I do like that Arizona group a good bit. And the way the Arizona pass defense profiles, very conservative unit. They play a lot of zone. They play a lot of shells, kind of try to take away like the long balls, and they don't blitz at a high rate. So JSN has been used in a more dynamic way the last couple of weeks when Metcalf was out, and then that continued a little bit even last week against the Niners with Metcalf back. And I think he's going to be a guy that continues to ascend, and his skill set, he can get those cheap, easy targets from the slot, but he can also make some plays a little bit deeper down the field. So yeah, I like that call. I like that call quite a bit. So now, it comes down to how are we going to build the rest of this lineup? It's interesting because I looked yesterday at DraftKings for the first time. I looked at both sites. And DraftKings, for whatever reason, they softened up their salaries. It's been pretty tight this year in terms of salaries, but a bunch of guys had like price reductions. Even guys like JSN's salary went down after his big game. So it's going to be softer and easier to make lineups over there. Didn't really do that here on DraftKings. So, or on FanDuel, it's a little bit different animal. So, as I'm doing this, now I'm looking at how are we going to keep this lineup from, like, once you have a core stack like this, that it's not overly expensive, but it's also, there's not like a cheap piece here, right? 6,700, it's the 4th highest priced tight end. None of the Murray, Connor, JSN are crazy expensive, but they're also not like the value pieces. So where you go next, I think a lot of people would then say, okay, who's my favorite play on the slate? Who's my favorite individual play? And spend there. And then you end up at the end trying to figure out, okay, who do I settle for in these last spots? What type of value do I go for? So my next move is going to be try to find the value first, or the guy that, that I like first, that kind of keeps options open, and see what that opens up for us. So I'm going to go with Tyrone Tracy, coming off the bye. He had, some nice games. He had over 100 yards and a touchdown in that game against the Panthers over in, I believe that was in Germany. So 2 of his last 3 games have been really good. Still priced below 7K. Like I said, there's not a ton of like, the salary doesn't open up as much over here as it does on DraftKings this week. So I think going with him, and then just looking at at defense, trying to fill in, what do we like for defense? And where do we want to go there? I think that this is a week where we could see some better defensive scores than we saw last week. I think the Broncos last week were the high with 13 points. I think that could correct itself a bit this week. So not opposed to spending a little bit at the position. I really like the Texans in this spot at home facing Will Levis, who admittedly he's been better in recent weeks. He's kind of kept it together, but also, it's a thing that the Chargers and the Vikings very good defenses as well as Houston. Houston is playing on a shorter week, so a little ding there. But if I'm going to spend up, I think Will Levis is a guy that I like betting against personally. So that leaves us with 6,300 per spot here. Is there anyone you're seeing in the wide receiver in that kind of mid-range? You know what? I'm gonna interject, and we're gonna put DJ Moore in here because, at 6,000. Sonic, one of our contributors who won the Millie Maker a few years ago, he made a comment because I keep putting DJ Moore in my FanDuel player grid. And I said, yep, and he will stay there until he inevitably has his blow-up game. And I think the Bears offense looked pretty good this last week in the first game. Sans Shane Waldron. So we'll throw him in, and I'll send it back to you for another receiver, and then we'll see what we got left for the flex.
Holding on to DJ Moore, huh? I like him too. I mean, it's going to be one of those Taysom situations. The week you decide not to play him, that's when he'll go nuclear. But Rome Odunze would also be an honorable mention. His target rate has gone up. I think last week was the first week that any Bears receiver was over 30%, and that was actually Odunze. So, he's another possible one for value. I have a couple of other defenses too, but it's never a bad thing to target against Will Levis, of course.
I'll swap it to Rome. The rookie. We know rookies can come on second half of the year. Vikings, very good run defense. Bears should have to pass it to move the ball in this one. 10 targets last week, led the Bears. So let's go with that one, especially because we are spending up at defense. So that gives us a little more to work with, 6,750. Okay. So take it away.
Okay, well, one guy, amazingly, his price doesn't really go that far up, which I'm surprised, but man, just the eye test on him last week. Let's go ahead and plug in Juwan Jennings for the Niners. I think he's at 6,700. That's a very important game for the Niners. You could almost say maybe it's a must-win for them and a division that's really tight. Obviously, we're building around their division rivals. But I think the Packers and the 49ers could present a decent game environment. Juwan Jennings has just been a beast. Just from a real-life football perspective, just watching him, how he's playing, the motivation he has on the field. And so I think that kind of works to have some decent salary left to finish it off at the flex. So Juwan Jennings would be a candidate for me. And then what would you be thinking on the flex? Or do you want
so real quick on the Niners, because today in the Daily Dose, our fantasy football newsletter came out, was our NFC West kind of midseason recap. We did the AFC 4 divisions last week. This week, I'm doing the 4 NFC divisions. The West was the first one of this week, came out today. So as I was going through the 49ers stuff, obviously Ayuk is out for the year. Jennings missed a couple games himself. Kittle missed last week. CMC missed the first 8 games. So they've dealt with, a litany of issues. Jennings, when he's been on the field, has been one of their kind of consistent pieces. And he's had 11 targets each of the last 2 games. He's their main pass weapon, and as I was digging into their team, Deebo Samuel, so the first 2 weeks of the season, he had nice outings. It's taking a minute to load here. But he had very good outings the first 2 games against the Jets and the Vikings. He hurt his calf at the end of week 2 against the Vikings, missed week 3, that Rams game. And then he came back and he played 3 games. And then in week, I believe it was 7, maybe 6, they played the Chiefs. And that's the game where he was sick. And it turned out it was pneumonia. But anyways, since those first 2 games, he only has the Thursday night game against Seattle where it was kind of like a fluky play that he caught a 75-yard touchdown. That's the only time he's had over, I believe, on FanDuel, the scoring system's a little different. But that's the only time he's had over 10 points on FanDuel since that calf injury. So where I'm going with this is it just kind of feels, and this is just gut. It feels like it might be a situation where we find out in the offseason from him or from Shanahan or somebody, oh yeah, like he was never right. Or, he lost 15 pounds when he had pneumonia and was never quite right. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying I think Jennings is going to continue to be a focal point for this team. I think, Debo will probably have some good games. I mean, maybe it'll be this week. But this Niners team, you said it, they're 5-5, playing in Lambeau. I live 40 minutes from Lambeau. We are supposed to get 3 to 5 inches of snow tonight. I don't know what the weather's going to be like Sunday, but just goes to, it's going to be a tough environment. They're going to, road teams coming into Lambeau late November. And then the following week they play the Bills. So in Buffalo. So it's important and they don't have time to mess around. And Jennings has been really, really good. So I do like that. I want to ask you, who are the other defenses? If we weren't going to go with the Texans, is there a defense that we could spend down for a little bit? Because there's somebody else that I'd like to put on this roster.
Yeah. Before that, if we did stay with this, we do have a good flex candidate in Jamo would actually fit because I think Jameson Williams. Yeah. He would fit just for reference. And that should be a decent game environment if Indy can push back a little bit. The other defense I had in mind was on your guys' team, the Bears. I kind of like the Bears, 3,900. They're playing the Vikings. The Vikings running game hasn't really looked that great recently, and the Bears have a good secondary. So I figured Sam Darnold's always prone to make mistakes. He likes to key in on forcing the ball to Jefferson. That was my more cheaper candidate for defense was potentially the Bears. They looked really good against the Packers last week, but other than the blocked field goal at the end, they would have won that game. And it's a division rivalry. So that was the other defense I had in mind. But I'm also fine with the Texans as well. But if we wanted to go to the Bears, then obviously that probably gives us more options to finish the team in the flex.
Yeah, let's go with the Bears then. And then the guy that I had my eye on was Jaden Reed. The reason I had my eye on Jaden Reed here is if we look at the Packers season in totality, they're 7-3. Their 3 losses are to the Eagles, the Vikings, and the Lions. Those are the 3 games in which Jaden Reed has gone over 100 yards. He had 34 points on FanDuel against the Eagles, 26.6 against the Vikings, and 16.8 against the Lions. Did not score a touchdown there. I don't think it's like when they use Jaden Reed, they're more likely to lose situation. But I do think, there is some signal here, just in the sense that I think they're probably a little bit more aggressive when they fall behind or in games like that. That slot type receiver, Reed is much better against zone than man. So, if you're potentially playing from behind, that would be a situation where you get, you get more conservative coverages where he gets open a little bit more. The 49ers do play a lot of zone coverage. So Reed's a guy that I like this week. And I like kind of pairing him with Jennings. And it doesn't mean the Packers have to lose this game, but I do think it's a competitive game. I think it's a game that is not going to be crazy low scoring. I think the offenses are good enough to push each other in a little bit of a back and forth manner. So yeah, that's how I'd like to finish this up. We do have $300 left. Do you have any, is there anyone on this roster that you're a little iffy on that you're thinking maybe you'd want to switch off from, or are you pleased with where we're at here?
No, I like your Reed pick there. That gives some correlation, gives kind of like a secondary correlation that you don't have to have, but it works in this case. And then I want to give a quick shout out to Majestic's workbook that you can, if you're on oneweekseason.com, you can go to the scroll and check it out. He actually has it up a little bit earlier than usual this week. And typically even though they moved Jaden Reed around, that he's a slot guy. And in looking at the scroll, I kind of did a quick glance of it. It's funny you put Reed in because I did a quick glance before we went on. And, you know, if you look at the net matchups for wide receiver, Green Bay is like maybe the second or third best slot wide receiver matchup on the slate this week, which would kind of be Jaden Reed territory. So kind of matches up with what I'm seeing on Majestic's workbook, which I like to at least give a little glance to in my building as the week goes along. So shout out to him. But no, I mean, I like it. I mean, I guess if we wanted to, obviously we have that extra salary that we could use. Oh, maybe now we'd be 100 off. I'd say if you wanted to switch out Najigba for Metcalf, but that we'd be $100 short on that one. Maybe at the running back spot, although I do like Tyrone Tracy as well. It's funny when you mentioned Tracy, that was one of the first towards value guys I was also thinking about this week. But you could move up to don't want to say DeAndre Swift, although you could pair him with the Bears defense, but he is getting swiped by Roschon Johnson more now, which is a little concerning. But you got the Buccaneer running backs that would be definitely capable of running on the Giants. But no, I mean, I think I like where we have it, and then maybe just as the week goes along, maybe even Kyler Murray, we'd still have Trey McBride, maybe see what we have at running back with $300 extra if we wanted to switch out Connor maybe. And where would that leave us at when we put Tracy back in?
Yeah, we'd be looking at if you took Connor out.
Brian Robinson, Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
They both could be good. Well, Brian Robinson would be a good option, and JT, if they can stay competitive.
Yeah. 26 touches last week against the Jets. Doubt he'll be, super high owned or anything like that. But definitely a guy who, he's going to be on the field a lot. The Lions are a tough matchup on paper, but also with how Richardson played last week, and him rushing a couple touchdowns in, that'll scare people off, but also that's going to make it a little easier for Taylor when they do those read option things near the goal line for him to get touchdowns, and his salaries come down a little bit, and I wouldn't expect him to be overly expensive there either. So could definitely make the switch there to Taylor if you wanted. I'm fine with it either way. I think that might be a situation where, thinking about the exact tournament you're building for. I think that for this particular tournament, the bomb that I'm building in, it's a $55 entry, 5,300 people in it. That's not a huge tournament. It's not like, the Sunday Million on here is over 100,000 entries. So this one, $50K to first, it's not a perfect payout structure. It's only $1,000 when you get down to 10th place. But you don't have to be perfect by any means. So, I think that type of tournament, I like the idea more of just sticking with Connor and making that concentrated bet with Arizona, whereas in like the Sunday Millie or a lotto style tournament, you might need Kyler to have 2 rushing and 2 passing touchdowns and hit that true ceiling that keeps Connor from kind of paying off his salary. You might need that from Kyler to win the quarterback position. Whereas in a little bit smaller field tournament like this one, just betting on the Arizona offense and wherever those points come from, if you're right, if they score 4 or 5 touchdowns, it doesn't really matter. Whereas in the lotto style tournament, you'd probably be better off switching to the lower owned Taylor and hoping Kyler has a ceiling game and Taylor, gets that 2 touchdown game that probably separates him from Connor. So just kind of an example there of being aware of the tournament you're building for. You can build a roster that can be used in kind of any tournament. but then evaluate it at the end and say, is there something I can do that optimizes it for this field?
Yeah, I think this is a good tournament team too for overall cumulative ownership as far as the whole team. I think we don't exactly know, but I mean, I think it'll probably shake out to be where it's a healthy cumulative ownership where you have some core things, but you're also being different enough, I think, to where you can capitalize. And then two more mentions for the extra 300. If you wanted to use it and replace Jaden Reed, you could get up to Brock Bowers and have a double tight end lineup. Obviously, Bowers has been getting crazy targeted. Or you can go Josh Jacobs on the same team, and you'd have enough salary to get up to him if you think that he can have some success at home against the Niners. So those would be other options to use up the rest of the salary. That would be viable. So.
Yeah, and Jacobs, the Packers had a Week 10 bye, but he had a huge game against Jacksonville, which seems like everybody does, I guess. But 28 FanDuel points. Then he was running really well against the Lions in Week 9, but then they fell behind and stopped running it. But he had 13 runs for 95 yards, very efficient. Last week against the Bears, very involved. He had 23 touches, but the underrated part of Jacobs having 23 touches against the Bears is the Packers, they didn't run many plays. I'm going to pull it up here quick, but where are we at? Yeah, they ran 46. There was 46 offensive snaps. So for Jacobs, having 23 opportunities, 18 rushes, and 5 targets, that means half of the opportunities flowed through him. So do like that call a good bit. I think Jacobs and Reed are probably the two best offensive players that the Packers have. It's a high leverage spot, important game. There's history between these teams. So I think either of those guys are really good plays here. And, you look at the 49ers defense, they are 19th against the run, 3rd against the pass. They've been better against the pass this year. Part of that, too, we'll want to watch the status of Nick Bosa for the 49ers, who was battling an injury and kind of sat out. He wasn't in at the end, I believe, of that Seattle game. And his presence will, affects the run and pass game and just the overall outlook for the Packers offense. So, yeah, I do like that call. And just to kind of expand on it and put a little bow on this lineup, we talk about it often, the, late swap, and this is a type of game. This is a type of lineup where we'll have Tracy, Odunze, and the Bears. Those are the only 3 players that we have going in the early window. But we'll have a lot of information because 7 of the 11 games will have played. So then, you have the Sunday night game is Philly and the Rams. Obviously some good players. That could be a higher scoring game, but those guys are all very expensive. So we'll have a pretty good idea as far as where ownership shakes out. We'll know ownership projections on Sunday, obviously, and then see how the early guys, how they end up owned. So you can kind of decide there. I think Reed or Jacobs would be good options, but you can decide, I think if Odunze and the Bears, if that game goes how you expect it, you can throw ownership to the side and just play whoever you think is the better play. If that game kind of flops and you've got a couple of iffy scores in your lineup so far, then you probably just go with the lower owned one. And I think that's a good way to, utilize and theorize around how to late swap. So, yeah, I like this lineup a good bit. It gives us a lot of flexibility, plays on, a couple narratives. And on this 11-game slate, it's really just betting on, Tracy is the only one-off play. And it's just betting on three other games going a specific way. So, yeah, I like it a good bit. Well done.
Yeah, for both of us, I think it's a good start. And yeah, late swap, always a valuable tool. Definitely assisted me on my best finish last week. although it could have been much better. But at the same time, I wouldn't have got in that position without kind of utilizing a late swap strategy. In this case, it was worth doing it based on ownerships and stuff. So yeah. What do you think, real quick? I found it shocking on FanDuel that Isaiah Pacheco, who's coming back this week, probably in a limited role, is $8,500. That's shocking to me. He's that
82.
Oh, it's 82. Okay.
Yeah, but still, he's right next to. He's above Jonathan Taylor, Kenneth Walker. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then some people were trying in our Discord and stuff. Were high on Kareem Hunt last week, but I talked it up from the start. Like, he's not. His receiving role against the Broncos was not sticky. The way they play defense is complete opposite of Buffalo, where Denver blitzes a lot and plays man coverage. Buffalo does not blitz and plays zone. So, and Hunt, he had 0 targets coming off that 10-target game. So just an example of the things we talk about in our NFL Edge write-ups and kind of the deeper aspects that we find. But yeah, I mean, I think Hunt will still be somewhat involved. I think it'll probably just be a timeshare. Either they'll rotate series or they'll, mix it up. I think both are probably unplayable this week. If you put them both, if you put both of those guys in like the high 6K range or right around 7K, then maybe there's some game theory aspect of it. But I don't think, even if one of these guys goes for 100 yards rushing and catches 2 passes for 20 yards and scores a touchdown, if they get 20 points, that's good, but I don't think it's worth the risk of playing either of them and taking, a 5 or 6 point game with such uncertain roles, just because there's a lot of other good running backs on this slate. So yeah, interesting decision. As I alluded to at the start, the pricing on FanDuel a little tougher this week, in my opinion, than how DraftKings has it, which is not usually the case. I texted JM in the group yesterday when I looked. I said, I guess DraftKings decided to start the holiday soft pricing a week early. So for those of you listening on our podcast feed, just to recap our lineup, we've got Kyler Murray at quarterback. We have James Conner and Trey McBride stacked with him, and then a Jackson Smith and Jigba, same game correlation as the bringback. Our other running back is Tyrone Tracy. And then we have Rome Odunze, Jawan Jennings, and Josh Jacobs as our receivers and flex, and the Bears defense to round it out. So, yeah, do you have any parting shots? Otherwise, we'll let the people get to it.
Yeah, our quarterbacks have been rocking this year. I know Bo Nix, big outing last week. Would have been nice if one of those 4 touchdowns went to Cortland Sutton, but I digress. Yeah, guys, we appreciate the constant communication in the Discord for Inner Circle and the FanDuel tab on our 1 week season Discord. Have enjoyed the back and forth and the communication with you guys. Please keep it coming. And we will see you hopefully at the top of the leaderboards, as we like to say.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining us. Check us out, oneweekseason.com. We have, we have some specials going on. Rest of season pricing is down, and we'll definitely have some like Black Friday type specials next week during Thanksgiving week. We'll have a ton of content for the Thanksgiving slate. So we are, hitting the ground running here as we head into week 12, then into Thanksgiving week. Thank you all for joining us. I am Mike. He is Maximus. Best of luck this week, and we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards.